All right, everybody, you have just tuned in to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. And a little excitement in my voice for several reasons. Number one, we are much, much closer to Pittsburgh Steelers football and actually getting a chance to see these guys with our own eyes a little bit. It's been such a unique, unusual training camp, but also things are looking up in Pennsylvania for high school sports and fans, and here in Michigan, our governor just opened the door for high school football to resume after it looked like we were going to be going in the spring. So a lot of good news type things there. And tonight we want to talk a little bit about the latest installment of Ben Roethlisberger's video series, which has been just outstanding. And the big thing tonight is the roster projection. The Steelers have to cut down by 4 p.m. on Saturday to their 53-man roster. So that'll be the big thing tonight, and we'll also mix in a little bit of contract talk as well as we get towards the beginning of the season. And joining me, as always, Ben, how are you this fine September Eve? See how Ben is doing, yes.
Much better now.
Much better now, yes. The very same sound that you hear at the beginning of the Steel City Blitz podcast, but now, by the way, a can opening. And Ian, did you go with the beer or the whiskey tonight? What'd you go with?
I went with whiskey. I'm drinking a Old Overholt whiskey.
Old Overholt. That's kind of a mouthful.
It is. It tastes like it has alcohol in it, and it's delicious.
Very good. Yes. And I have a very basic Coors Light, but it's nice and cold, and right now that's all that matters.
Enjoy your water.
Yeah, I know. It's water with...
It's fizzy water, though. Come on.
I'm sorry. I'm a large person. I have to watch my calorie intake. I got to do something. In any case, guys, the Ben Roethlisberger video series started off great. It has been a really good visual of Ben's entire process from the injury through his surgery, and we got part 2 yesterday. It emerged, and again we got to see some really, really cool stuff. And just me personally, as I was watching this, I just kept kind of thinking, I never really thought Ben Roethlisberger would ever do anything like this. And I was just really, really appreciative of the fact that he and his wife, Ashley, and everybody was so on board with doing this. And it's been really, really good. And Ian, I know you jotted down some notes and stuff yesterday. What were some of the takeaways that you took from part 2 of this?
So once again, we talked last week about just how candid Ben has been throughout this and how open and honest he was. And I think, one of the things that got me too was there was shots in this segment of it that, he just recorded on his phone, like kind of as a video diary, saying, hey, it's this day, this is what's going on with me, so on and so forth. So he's kind of been working his way up to recording this all along, which I got to think was also some motivation for him along the way, kind of knowing, hey, I'm kind of making this video, so I got to keep working to get better. And there was an excellent segment at the end of it, him talking about what motivates him, and you could really see his growth as a team leader, and how he really wants to do it for kind of everyone in the building too. Yeah. Not just winning for himself anymore like he did when he was a young kid, but he wants to do it for everyone around him, which is pretty cool to see. Him having that team focused and team centric attitude. The one other thing that I really noticed was last year, whenever Mason had his first start in San Francisco, there was a lot of chatter on Pittsburgh sports radio, and I think we may have even addressed it on the podcast about why isn't Ben at the game? Why isn't he supporting Mason? Of course, there was some stories out there even after Mason had been drafted about the sort of tenuous relationship that they may or may not have had. But it provided a very good insight into that. I mean, he had surgery the next morning after that game, and he had to do some pre-surgery prep on Sunday. So even though they were in San Francisco and he was in LA, he couldn't be there. But the interesting thing was, he had the hotel set up a television for him to watch the game, and there were shots of him there like reacting to the game, and just how into it he was. And it's kind of refreshing seeing like, oh yeah, hey, Ben Roethlisberger will scream at the TV just like I do. Okay, it felt good.
He looked like an expectant father at times watching the game. It was really, really interesting, but it did answer that question about where was he during that time. Ben, what have you taken from this so far, and did anything really stand out to you in the second installment?
I do appreciate the fact that he's being as open and as candid as he has been, and he's talking about himself, and he's not doing what he's done previously, which is involve teammates and things, and maybe say things that he shouldn't have said. He's just talking about his own struggles and how he's trying to deal with it, and that's pretty cool. You look at these guys, and sometimes as fans, I think we forget that they're human beings, and this kind of lets you see some of that side of it, and including the point when he gets home and he's had surgery and his kids are running up going, "Daddy!" That was pretty cool. Honestly, being able to see that side of his life, that was pretty cool.
Well, yeah,
and the being away from the game that jumped out at me. I just dropped my beer.
That's not good.
Oh no.
It's alcohol abuse, man. We can't tolerate that.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, when he got home and there was the scene of him and he's got the arm in the brace, the elbow's all braced, and he's walking with, and he's got the shovel in his left hand. And if you're a dog owner, you knew immediately what he was doing.
Yeah.
Although he didn't say it. Here's Ben
he
Roethlisberger.
did. No, he said he was picking up dog do. And
no, he did. But at first he doesn't mention it. And he said something very humble about, look, even I have to do this, or even I choose to do this, and this guy's worth hundreds of millions, and he's out here picking up dog poop. I thought it was refreshing.
It's just like he basically is saying, just because you're an injured reserve doesn't mean you can't contribute. And that was cool. And then the other thing was watching him in the training room and dealing with Dr. Bradley.
Yes.
And all of that, and damn, the size of the scar. Holy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't expecting it, because
I wasn't either.
Those tendons aren't that big. The flexor tendons, they're just not that big. So I didn't know it was going to be that big a scar. That must have been a really, lengthy open procedure. Not at all what I was expecting. No. Anyway, it's cool though to see that kind of stuff. That was really my big takeaway. It's just to kind of get a different point of view on that whole process.
The thing I took too was also from the training room a little bit, the banter, the conversation, the back and forth that he has with Dr. Bradley. I found it to be just hilarious. They are almost like two college buddies kind of going back and forth at each other. And I liked that. And then Dr. Bradley said some things. You can see him. He's doing the interview from his office at this point. And he talked about the things that all these guys, but Ben specifically, go through just to play a game. The surgery, the rehab, the pain, all of that stuff. And I know nobody's going to feel sorry for guys making tens of millions of dollars and everything else, but there is still something to be said for the things that they do put themselves and their family members through in order to keep playing this game. And I thought he really kind of pointed that out quite eloquently. And I'm looking forward to the next one. I just think this has been really, really good. And I also have no doubts. I think Ben is dyeing his beard. It's very dark.
Seriously?
Well, somebody on Twitter asked about that, and I kind of hesitated, but I don't know. It's pretty dark. His
beard's always been pretty dark, though.
Yeah, it's just kind of dark. It's got this nice walnut look to it, or something like that. And I'm all salt, so I don't know, but we had a good laugh.
Well, you're old. That's different.
Yeah. Well, this is true. Ben, you been through the medical stuff a lot more than I have. My wife asked me this, and I didn't have any
injuries.
Yeah. Do you know how they reattached his tendons? Is it with us?
I do not, and I did not. No, I did not research the procedure at all.
Okay.
I was interested in that, but I just haven't gotten around to doing it. There are 5 tendons. They all meet in one spot.
Yep.
I don't know how they reattached it. I know for several months he wasn't even allowed really to completely straighten his arm out.
Right.
Couldn't use his hand because those tendons are attached. Each tendon's attached to a finger. Those flexor tendons. So it literally is. I mean, without those tendons, you can't hang on to a ball. So it literally was career threatening.
Yeah.
I don't have a clue, honestly, how his doctor went about doing it. Okay. I just was like, wow. The whole thing, though, very insightful. That is the term I would use walking away from it, is that it was very insightful in a lot of different ways, not just, looking at the medical procedure, but his life and what he goes through. That and Ryan Switzer at a concert. What a dork. God, what a dork. That was just peak dorkness. I was just like, dude, really? They included this?
Okay.
I think Ben included that on purpose to embarrass you, Ryan.
I really think he did too, because it made little sense to me whatsoever. And I just kept laughing at it. I mean, we'll talk a little more about Switzer in our roster projections, but yeah, it was one of the dorkier moments that I've seen. Ian,
good for him. He was happy. Whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Ian, contract stuff. Before we get into the roster breakdown, Cam Heyward. Cam has always struck me as a guy who's pretty blunt. He'll just come out and say things. He's professional about it. Doesn't say anything to offend anybody. But he put out some tweets this week that kind of had a lot of people scratching their heads that, man, maybe this doesn't get done and maybe he isn't back next year. Where do you think we are with all this? Because, the Steelers don't negotiate once the kickoff begins on opening night.
That is true. That being said, I think maybe a deal doesn't get done versus maybe he's not back next year are two completely different things, because don't forget, there is even if they don't get a deal done before training camp, there's always the possibility of them getting something done in the off season after the regular season ends, but before the next season starts. So, that possibility is still out there. I think part of it could just be a cash flow issue from the Steelers' standpoint. That, I mean, they're relatively tight up against the cap. They have about $5 million in cap space. They could work a deal with Hayward that would not really raise or lower his current cap hit much at all. They keep it about the same for this year. That being said, there are clauses where when you sign a guy, you have to put so much of the contract into escrow in the bank. And considering the fact that the Steelers just had to refund basically all of their season ticket holders' money, which probably amounts to somewhere in the range of $45 to $50 million. They may just not have a lot of money in the bank right now to be able to put into escrow or to actually spend on, a signing bonus.
Yeah.
You don't really think about when you think about it from the cap standpoint, because when you think about the salary cap, you're like, oh, the signing bonus you give them a higher signing bonus, so it gets spread out over the years. But from an actual cash flow standpoint, like, you're writing that guy a check for whatever it is, $20-30 million right on the spot. So I think part of I don't want to even call it a hesitation. I think part of the deal right now is both sides want to get a deal done. The Steelers may just not have enough cash in the bank to be able to do what they need to be able to do to sign Hayward, to give him his market value.
Maybe they can ask Ben Roethlisberger for a loan. He's sitting on a few bucks, but
I'm going to look at this from a slightly different standpoint.
Okay.
One, my understanding is the Steelers borrow money I'll give you an example. Ben Roethlisberger's contract, when they signed him to his last one, to fund the guarantee, they borrowed the money, and they borrow money at close to 0%. So I'm not really convinced that cash flow is the issue here with Cam. I think they are concerned about what's going to happen from a revenue standpoint, and it's beginning to be a worst case scenario where they may not have fans in the stands all year, and that's not just season ticket holders and that revenue. It's all the concessions revenue, and they still have to pay rent on that stadium.
Yeah,
still got to pay rent. There's no rent forgiveness just because there aren't fans in the stands. Still got to pay rent, So all of that definitely hurts them from a revenue standpoint, and they're concerned about what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But I also think that they're looking at it from this standpoint. The franchise tag value this year for defensive tackle was $15.5 million. The market for defensive tackles right now is about 17 per year if you're at the top of your game, top of the league, top tier guys. So that's where Cam would be. They're looking at it from the standpoint that they can franchise him next year, and it gives them time to negotiate a deal. Yeah. And I think they're also looking at it from the standpoint that they may have to next year choose between Cam and Stephon Tuitt. And I don't know how that's going to turn out. I mean, honestly, Tuitt is super talented. But I can't say that he's the better of the two players, But then I think back to Greg Lloyd and why am I forgetting his name? Chad Brown. And they wanted to keep Chad Brown, but on the first day of free agency, Seattle, Paul Allen flies him out there, and before they even sit down to talk about a contract, Paul Allen hands him a check for $4 million. And back then, that was a lot of money for linebackers.
Big chunk of money.
A lot of money for linebackers. It'd be like a guy today walking in and Paul Allen handing him a check for $40 million, which Paul Allen could do.
Yeah.
So, they couldn't keep him. And their rationale at the time was, well, we feel like, Greg Lloyd is a guy who really loves football, and we want to keep him as a Steeler, and yada, yada, yada. But then
I remember those.
They let Chad Brown leave, and they let Rod Woodson leave, and they made a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah, Ed Bouchette had a nice article today. I think it was today in The Athletic, and he interviewed Bill Cowher, and he was talking about cutting players, the difficulty in that, and Greg Lloyd came up. James Harrison came up, but so did Rod Woodson too, and along with some others. And you could definitely tell in Bill Cowher's answers that, kind of like, damn, we messed up in some spots.
Well, he didn't really have a choice then. I mean, for a lot of that was Tom Donahoe, and he got to decide, and that's eventually why things between the two of them came to a head.
Yep.
The other one was Kevin Green. Cowher really wanted to keep him. They did know they had Gilden behind him, and they liked Gilden a lot, and it just came down to money. They didn't even make Kevin Green an offer, and Cowher was not happy at all about that, and made it clear that he wasn't happy and did not agree with that. But I think next year there are going to be some tough decisions that have to be made.
Absolutely.
All over the place on the salary cap, and if Tuitt has another year where he misses a bunch of time because he can't stay healthy, it may seal his fate. And, he may leave the team.
Yeah.
And Cam Heyward would stay. Honestly, if I had to choose one guy, it would be Hayward. I don't think he's as physically talented as Tuitt, but he's a better player.
Yeah.
He just is.
Before we get into the roster projection, just a reminder that you're listening, of course, to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by Deck Roofing. They serve Broward and the southern Palm Beach counties. Whether it's commercial, residential, multifamily, or condos, contact Deck Roofing today by visiting deckroofingincorporated.com. Guys, I think some of these positions are as concrete as ever could be. And so we'll just kind of slide by some of these because they're not going to merit a lot of discussion. Ian, let's just start with quarterback here. I tinkered with the idea earlier on that maybe Paxton Lynch might give Duck Hodges a little bit of a challenge.
I hoped.
Well, I did. I hoped too.
It isn't happening. It's not.
No, Ian. I mean, do you see us with Ben, Mason, and Duck again? Is that where you're at?
Yes, unless someone gets cut from another team, that we can sign on a relatively minimum deal. I mean, we just talked about with Cam Heyward, they don't have a lot of cap space. So when you talk about bringing in outside guys, you're talking about bringing in salary cap contracts. And even, Josh Rosen's been a popular guy that a lot of people have talked about. He's bounced around between Arizona and Miami, and he's had whatever it is, 8 different offensive coordinators in 5 years or something like that. But, Josh Rosen was a top 10 pick, and there's a fairly sizable contract that comes with being a top 10 pick. I mean, it's not, a veteran size contract, but it's a decently large contract. And, trading for Josh Rosen from Miami, while he might be worthless to Miami at this point, you're trading for that contract. So you're better off actually waiting to see if Miami cuts Rosen and then sign him on the free agent market to, a deal that fits your cap standards, rather than trading for his existing contract, which would be his draft value contract.
Yeah, no, you and I were bantering back and forth about it today, and no, you're exactly right. Ben,
and just to be clear about one other thing here, signing Josh Rosen or trading for him, which they shouldn't trade for him, but signing him, you're not necessarily signing him to be the heir apparent to Ben Roethlisberger. You're saying, can we improve the 53 guys on our roster? So the question is not, is Josh Rosen the heir to Ben Roethlisberger? The question is Josh Rosen better than the last guy on our depth chart, which in this case is Devlin Hodges? And the answer is yes. So that's sort of how you have to view these bottom of the roster signings. It's not you're signing someone to replace your starter. Is he better than the bottom guy on our depth chart?
Good point. Ben, where are you with quarterbacks? Same spot?
Yeah, pretty much. And to expand upon the point that Ian just made about Rosen in particular, if you trade for his contract, you're getting a guy this year who's only going to make $750 because his roster bonus has already been paid by the Dolphins. However, you're also picking up the guaranteed salary for 2021, which is almost $3 million.
Oh,
so basically, you got to take that into consideration. So you're looking at about $3.8 million for 2 years. Is that guy worth $1.9 million a year for a couple of years? Is it worth it to you to take that on to see what he can do? And given the cap constraints they're already up against and how much it's going to fall next year, the cap's going to fall $23 million next year. Yeah. And I don't see it unless he gets cut and wants to come to Pittsburgh. I don't see it happening. But as far as the top 3 go, there really isn't. There really is no question at this point. Lynch isn't going to make it, unfortunately. He's been too erratic. That's too bad because he's got the big arm. He's got the big arm. You want to see him do it, but
it
just isn't happening.
Ben, we'll stay with you as we move to the running backs. Connor is going to be your RB1. Snell has had a very good camp, dropped a little weight. They like what he's doing. But who else is on that opening day active 53?
Well, bear in mind that they have 2 pass catching targets at tight end now. They can run more tight end sets. 2 tight end sets, excuse me.
Right.
Which means there is a lesser need at wide receiver. Flat out. That is what it means. And you couple that with the fact that there have been so many years that the Steelers have had to add either street free agents or guys off their practice squad at running back because they've had injuries at running back. And I think they keep their best 4 running backs and maybe stash 1 or 2 more on the practice squad, like a Kareth White. So that kind of tells you where I'm going with it already. I think it starts exactly where they started last year, where you've got Connor at number 1, Jalen Samuels at number 2, then Snell, and then Anthony McFarland as your developmental running back. But McFarland is going to develop this year. He's not going to be some guy they keep around and see what he can do in the future. He'll get playing time. I just think that these guys are all going to have different roles. You've got Samuels, who's going to be a third down back. You've got Connor, who really can play on any down. He can pick up the blitz now. He's an adequate receiver. Samuels is a better receiver. He's a much better player in space than he is between the tackles, for sure.
Yeah.
You want to run some misdirection, or handle the ball out of the shotgun, and widen the gaps between your linemen if you're going to hand the ball to Samuels. And Snell, you can just bash away with. And then McFarland, I really think McFarland is a guy who has got the ability to be a future feature back.
Okay.
So I think that's kind of the direction they're thinking that he's going to go, but he's not there yet. And I don't think that they've given him enough time to learn the offense to play the central role as the guy who starts week in, week out. Yet. Now, I think as the season goes on, his workload will increase. Derek Watt will kind of round things out as a blocker, pass catcher. So, I mean, you may see 2 running backs and 2 tight ends on the field at the same time at various points.
Crazy.
With a fullback, a running back. Yeah, I know, right? We're going to run the slanted eye now. Here we go. It's like they used to do with Bettis.
Yeah. The old offset eye. Get Kreider in there to lead block.
Oh, man, that guy was great.
My one regret as a Steelers fan is never buying a Dan Kreider jersey.
Oh, no.
I like every year I was like, oh, man, I should get a Kreider jersey, and I never did. And I look back on it, I'm like, man, I should have bought that.
Oh, he was just a fullback through and through, wasn't he? Ian, are you in the same camp there on those projections for running back?
Yes. I would agree with that. The guy that always seems to keep hanging around is Trey Edmonds. He'll probably make it on the practice squad again this year, especially with the expanded practice squad size. And the other name I'll throw out there is Wendell Smallwood. We picked him up from the Eagles. He basically does a lot of the same things that Kareth White and Anthony McFarland do. He played at West Virginia. He was a small, fast running back, can return kicks. But there's no way we keep 3 of those type guys on the roster with White and McFarland and Smallwood. And considering the draft investment they made in McFarland, I got to think White and Smallwood are probably competing for a practice squad spot. I would have a hard time seeing one of them get a roster spot unless it was purely as a kick returner, kind of in that Stephon Logan role. But McFarland can return kicks too. So, let's not put that past him.
Yeah, good point. Let's slide over, and Ian, we'll keep it with you. Tight ends might be the most easy 3 selections there are of all the roster projections. I'm going to assume you're just going to pencil in Ebron, Vance McDonald, and Zach Gentry.
Yeah. Unfortunately, on the third point with Zach Gentry because he sucks. But they invested a 5th round pick in him last year, and we've seen it with guys like Brian Allen in the past that they will typically give their draft picks 2 years to see what they can do. And if they suck, which I mean, Zach Gentry hasn't shown really anything. Then they'll let him go. But this will be his second year. They'll see if they have anything there. But I think not only that he makes the roster, but given the mass uncertainty that this season comes with, we've talked before that the first 4 weeks are essentially they're going to be regular season games because they count, but they're going to be like preseason games because they're going to be sloppy and trying to find their rhythm. So, we didn't get a chance to see anyone in preseason, so we have no idea if anyone's outplayed him, but he has that familiarity with the playbook that I think, gets
everything I've been told is that he's improved as a blocker, he's improved as a receiver, but that doesn't really say a whole lot. But he is head and shoulders above anybody else. Yes, exactly. Ben, I'm going to assume you're just going to go with those same guys, and if you have a comment on the tight ends, go ahead. Otherwise, go ahead and just jump right into the wide receivers.
On the tight ends, I agree with Ian. You can write in Eric Ebron and Vance McDonald and Penn and Zach Gentry and then erase it and then write his name again because you don't really have a choice. The only guy behind him, the only guy competing with him is Kevin Rader, and he's not going to beat him. It just is what it is. Yeah. As far as the wide receivers go, I think they're only going to be 5.
Yep.
It'll be Juju, Deontay, James Washington, Claypool, obviously, and then probably Ryan Switzer, unfortunately, just because everybody behind him just sucks, And I tweeted something today more than anything else, just to create some conversation. Man, there were some reactions to that. Basically, what I said is, Tomlin announced today that Switzer would not be the primary punt returner, that it's going to be Deontay Johnson. And I said, hey, this reduces the chance that Switzer makes the roster. And I'm serious. It does reduce the chance, but it's not a lock that he's not going to make it. I didn't mean to give people that idea. Kick returners are really easy, really, generally speaking, pretty easy to replace. Punt returners are not. And the one guy who's going to save him, because he doesn't do much on offense, if they decide that they want to go another direction, the one guy who's going to save him is going to be Danny Smith.
Yeah.
My understanding is they haven't even tried Ray McLeod at kick returner, which I don't get. I thought that was why they brought him on, because they wanted to.
I did too.
Inject something in there into the return game. But if let's say they decided to go that direction and take McLeod and put him in the slot as the next guy, because he's got return ability, he could be that 5th wide receiver. Deion Kane, if he had better hands, would be a lock to be the 5th receiver. But he's too inconsistent there. So I'm looking at what's behind Switzer and begrudgingly acknowledging that he's probably going to make the roster, which annoys the shit out of me. But there's not anybody good to push him off. I mean, and it's not like he's good. He's not.
No, I'm with you. I think he makes the roster. I don't think it has anything to do with being buddies with Ben. I think
neither do I.
No, I think it has everything.
I've tweeted this a bunch of times. Look, guys, if Ben Roethlisberger had as much say in roster construction as fans seem to think he does,
right?
Eli Rogers would have made the team last year instead of Johnny Holton.
That's true. Absolutely.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Rogers still a free agent. So, and they're buddies. And on top of that, Rogers is actually a pretty decent player. I wouldn't mind him being added now.
No.
But it is what it is. Yep. It's probably going to be Switzer.
Yep. Ian, quick take on wide receivers before we move over to the OL.
Yeah, I agree that I think it's going to be Switzer just because he kind of fills that backup slot position role. The other guys with Deion Kane, he's 6'2", 202, and some of the other guys they've signed lately, Blacknall, who went to Penn State, even DeAndre Tompkins, they're taller guys, they're more outside guys. So, between Kane and Blacknall and Tompkins, they're more outside guys. Then you've got Switzer and McLeod, who are more inside guys. So, and you have 4 guys on the roster right now in Juju, Deontay, James Washington, and Chase Claypool that are all capable of playing on the outside. They may move some of them into the slot in certain situations, but they're all capable of playing on the outside. So you've got 4 outside guys. It doesn't really make sense to have a 5th outside guy. They're probably going to want someone that is more of a slot only type guy. Deion Kane can't really move into the slot. So I think Kane has a shot to make the practice squad, though, to be kind of that top backup as an outside. I guess he'd be the 3rd string outside receiver, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I concur. Ian, jump into the offensive line. 8, 9. What do you think they keep here, and perhaps more importantly, who wins the battle there for the right tackle?
Yeah, they always keep 9. So I'm not going to differentiate from that. And my gut tells me it's going to be Chukwuka Okorafor that wins it. I have no inside information on that. That's just kind of a gut feeling that he wins the right tackle spot. And we'll see how things go too, because David DeCastro has been battling an injury. Kevin Dotson's apparently been playing very well in camp so far,
Right.
which is a great sign to see. But if they have to shuffle the inside of the line a little bit, then maybe Wisniewski becomes a starter. Maybe Filer has to bump back out to tackle if things don't go well for either Okorafor or Banner. The nice thing is they have options at this point.
They do.
Right? They've got guys who are versatile that they can move around. And yeah, I think offensive line's pretty much set in stone here. I don't really think there's much of a battle going on. I think Derwin Gray's your 9th offensive lineman, and you go from there.
That's really the only gray area, no pun intended, is that 9th offensive lineman. I mean, you've got the starting 5: Al, DeCastro, Pouncey. I should have said Al, Filer, Pouncey, DeCastro, and probably Chooks. I agree with you, but let's just say it's Chooks to start the season, and he doesn't play particularly well, and he loses a job to Banner. I really think the first few games are going to be like a preseason games, and guys may lose jobs early in the season, and this may be a league-wide thing. And they're both on the roster regardless. And then you've got, obviously they're going to keep Wisniewski because he's a versatile,
very
versatile center guard. That guy, that cagey veteran who knows all the tricks. But man, Dotson, they're definitely keeping because he's performed so well thus far.
Dude is a master.
Well, yeah, I mean, as a run blocker, you knew he was going to be devastated. You watched his film in college and just went, "Oh my God!" It's like watching a grown man play with middle schoolers.
Yes.
I mean, seriously, that was what it was like watching. I mean, and then there were stories. Again, I know I've said this before, but there are stories about him in college telling the defensive line what gap the running back was coming to. Telling him, hey, that guy's going to be right on my ass, over my right shoulder. You ready? You ready? It's on 3. On 3. You ready?
All right, I got to keep this going along, or I'm going to get the giggles here. Move over to the defensive side of the ball, Ben, and defensive line. We the three of us have had some conversations that maybe it's possible that they look to the waiver wire here. But you got some info today that you believe McCullers is going to be on the roster again.
Well, I mean, if somebody shakes loose, that they believe can, I mean, like a surprise cut today was Clinton Dix.
Yeah.
If somebody who is at least an average starter at nose tackle gets cut, well, there's going to be a decision that has to be made, right?
Yeah.
I doubt that given their cap situation, there will be any waiver claims for anyone who gets cut, provided that they're anything more than a minimum salary guy. Let's say anybody who makes more than $1 million a year, they're not going to put a waiver claim in for. But if somebody comes loose who is an improvement over McCullers, I guess I could see it. But basically what I was told is McCullers came in really good shape. They're happy with him, or as happy as they can be with McCullers, and that he's probably going to make the team. And I had hoped Carlos Davis was going to push him for that spot, and apparently he isn't. So, I've got Hayward to it, obviously, and Tyson Alualu making the team, and then Chris Wormley, Isaiah Buggs, and probably Dan McCullers. But you never know. I mean, something can happen. A lot can happen between now and next Saturday.
Yeah, and Wormley has been a very limited participant so far, but he was a full go today. So if that continues, I think he'll be fine in the role that they're expecting him. Go ahead, Ian, address anything defensive line wise, and then move over to inside linebackers.
No, I think defensive line is one of our deepest positions. I think defensive line and cornerback are pretty much set in stone, and they're two of the deepest spots on the team. So no additional comments there. Inside linebackers, top 3 are set in stone. Devin Bush and Vince Williams are your 2 starters, and then Ulysses Gilbert, there have been a lot of good reports about throughout camp, will be the number 3 guy. And, they may even try and sub Gilbert in for Williams on some passing downs to see how he can hold up, because he is a faster, more athletic guy. There have been talks of using safeties, basically Marcus Allen, and kind of why they drafted Antoine Brooks too, to fill that sort of dime backer role, to slide basically bring a third safety onto the field and line them up as an inside linebacker to give you some more speed and agility there, especially in long passing situations. And that's a tactic that some teams have used before. I want to say that the Chargers did it against the Ravens last year, and it worked pretty well, having, trying to limit Lamar Jackson's running abilities. And there have been some other teams that have kind of used that strategy against, especially teams with running quarterbacks, to throw a safety in there instead of a run stopping linebacker. And that's given them some more speed to chase down those guys to the outside. But we'll see what happens. I think those 3 are set in stone. Robert Spillane is probably the 4th best inside linebacker on the roster right now, but I'm not really convinced he makes it. He was on the roster at the end of the year last year just because of injuries, but he started the year on the practice squad, and that's probably where he'll wind up again this year. And there could always be some guys that get cut out there that you could sign as a bottom of the roster kind of guy that'll contribute on special teams. And they, I doubt they'll only keep 3 inside linebackers. They'll probably keep 4. I think 4 inside, 5 outside is probably the way they'll go.
Spillane's kind of a nice little special teamer, decent against the run, horrible against the pass type guy. Ben, go ahead and attack the inside linebackers if you got anything there, and then move to the outside guys.
No, I mean, I pretty much agree with Ian. It's going to be Bush and Williams and Ulysses Grant. Excuse me, Gilbert. Uli Gilbert. And then, Spillane, who's not, he's not super impressive. It is what it is. But he, he is a decent special teams player. And I think, honestly, that's probably what gets him the job this year, is the fact that Danny Smith usually makes the calls for the guys at the end of the roster, and whether or not, if you can play special teams, chances are much better that you make the team than if you do not, if you cannot. So it's not like he's an outstanding special teamer, but he's okay. He really is. Yeah.
So Ben, on the outside, I'm just going to assume you've got TJ Budd, the rookie Highsmith, Tuzar perhaps, and then of course Ola. That gives you 5. Is that what you're looking at?
Yeah, I'm going to say in this order: TJ, Budd, Ola, Tuzar, and then Highsmith at number 5. Okay. I think that's currently the way it is. All right. I think that Highsmith will earn more time over the course of the season, just like a handful of rookies we've got on the roster this year. Right. Early on, these guys won't see a lot of snaps, but as the season goes on, as they pick things up, as faith in them is developed, from the coaches and their fellow players, they will eventually earn more snaps. But early on, they're going to be bottom of the depth chart guys. Sure. But it's pretty simple. There's really not a whole lot of guesswork at outside linebacker this year.
No, I don't think so either. Ian, if you had any thoughts on that, otherwise, just jump into safety and cornerback, if you would.
Yeah. So cornerback is really straightforward. It's, Hayden and Nelson are your starters on the outside. Mike Hilton is your slot guy. Cam Sutton's kind of your utility guy that can fill in wherever you need him to. And then Justin Lane, they're still trying to bring along. He was a converted wide receiver to corner in college. And we drafted him in the 3rd round, so there's the investment there, and they're still working him along and getting him into the rotation. But those are your 5 corners, and that is what it is. It's safety. Top 2 are obvious, Minka and Terrell Edmonds. And then beyond that, they really don't have a whole lot of depth at safety. So if they're looking to sign someone that gets cut somewhere, A safety would be a good spot. I mean, they drafted Antoine Brooks, but we talked about him being more of a dime backer, strong safety type. And then, Jordan Dangerfield's kind of a cat of nine lives that he continues to make the roster year after year. And he probably will, just for his special teams play and his, primarily his special teams play, but he knows the playbook. So that's really what's going to come down to. And Marcus Allen probably makes the roster as well, just because of, they're using him at inside linebacker. So versatility, knows the playbook, and can play special teams. When you start to get down to it, that's going to make a difference for these last few guys.
Yeah, I agree with you, and we're right up against it. So I'm just going to tell you right now, it'll be Cam Canada snapping. It'll be Chris Boswell doing the kicking, and all of you will be really excited to see Jordan Berry back as your punter. I've heard he's been challenged a little bit, but I think that's what's going to happen. In any case, make sure you check out the website, steelcityblitz.com, and follow us on Facebook, Steel City Blitz, and of course on Twitter at SC Blitz. For these two yahoos, this is Steel Dad signing off on the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast, presented by Deck Roofing Incorporated of South Florida. And hey, go Steelers.
Ravens suck.